So hello everyone and welcome to another Warframe video. So starting with this video, I wanted to start covering and going over some of the augment mods that are available through the game. The ones which I actually found quite interesting through my own gaming experience. Since this is through my own experience, I probably won't, or I know I won't cover all the useful mods available, but at least of the ones that I have found very useful, I wanted to start introducing them through these videos. So the mod that I wanted to introduce in this video is one called the Winds of Purity, and it's an augment mod for a weapon rather than a frame. Now this mod is available through the new Loka Syndicate, and you have to attain the level of pure to be able to get this mod through the Syndicate. Now, if you don't want to, if you're not in New Loka and don't want to join the Syndicate, then probably the easiest way to get this mod is through the trade channel, where people who are in the Syndicate often do sell this mod or will be willing to get this mod for you if you ask for it. So it's actually a mod that's relatively available. The one that I got through the trade channel since I wasn't a New Loka Syndicate member. And it costed me about 10 platinum to be able to get this mod. Now looking at it through hindsight and through my own experiences, I find that 10 platinum now is actually a very inexpensive price for what this mod has helped me through. It has helped me get through a lot of difficult missions, and without this mod it probably would have ended up in a different outcome. And so I do find this mod extremely useful, and so although this isn't one of the newest augment mods that are available, I did want to introduce this, especially for people who are just starting the game and who find there are limited options for certain things. In this case, health restoration. So let me go over that in more clarity and detail as we go along. So as mentioned, this mod is for weapon augmentation rather than a frame. And the weapon in question is the Furis and the Mark I variation, both a secondary weapon. And the nice thing about this is both the Furis and the Mark I variation is readily available even early on in the game. And so the Furis is available as a blueprint for 15,000 credits. And the Mark I Furis is actually available as a whole weapon for the same number of credits. So it's a relatively easy weapon to get. And thus you don't have to really become a high-level player to be able to get the benefits of this actual mod. In fact, the mod is probably harder to get than the weapon itself. Now, before moving on, one last thing I should mention is that it does not work with the Dex Furis variant. So if you were thinking of getting the Winds of Purity and using it on that particular anniversary weapon, then I just want to clarify the issue so that you don't end up being disappointed by buying that mod and finding out that you can't use it on the Dex Furis. So the main property of this mod, Winds of Purity, is its lifesteal capability. Namely, at its max rank of 3, it will provide a 0.2 or a plus 0.2 lifesteal capability to the actual Furis weapon. Now what that means is for every 100 points of or health of damage that the Furis actually does on an enemy will actually restore 20 points of health to you. So as you can imagine, this weapon becomes quite useful to be able to restore any health that you have lost during the mission itself. Now the second effect that this mod actually provides is the area effect called Purity. Now Purity is a blast effect that's triggered by the actual collection of affinity during the actual mission itself, and once it actually triggers, it will deal 1,000 corrosive damage to the enemy as well as the actual status effects from that actual blast. At the same time, it will restore 25% of the player's max health and boost the actual total health by an extra 25% for 30 seconds. So you could imagine that with the combination of both the Purity Blast as well as the Lifesteal effect, this weapon can actually become an amazing health restore weapon for your missions when you actually use the Furis. Okay, so next up, let's take a look at the Furis. And simply put, the Furis is basically a pea shooter of a secondary weapon. I don't think it'll ever become a weapon of choice for anybody just by a standalone weapon. And if you can see, puncture is its main damage, but even so, even with its main damage, it provides very little damage per round. It has very low crit chance and very low status chance. And the only redeeming factor is it shoots a boatload of bullets all out at once. And of course, that can be a double-edged sword, because although it can actually combine and give a halfway decent amount of damage, it'll also run out of ammo relatively quickly if you use this as your main weapon. Now, I've formatted this 3 times for the sake of using Winds of Purity, and by doing that I could add Max Hornet Strike and Lethal Torrent, and of course Winds of Purity. And in addition to that, I've added Seeker to the weapon, basically because of its punch-through capabilities, and by doing so, not only can you actually damage more enemies, but at the same time, that damage will of course result in faster restoration of your health by punching through the first enemy and hitting the second. Okay, and because it's actually a puncture weapon, I've added no return and 3 elementals to that. And with the 3 formas, you could basically get that. You could actually use a 4th forma and probably improve on your elementals, but then you may be limited to which elementals you use. Now I have a secondary configuration where I remove no return and put suppress in, and this is mostly for spy type of stealth missions where you might want a quiet weapon. And so these are basically the 2 configurations I use for this weapon, and with doing so, it actually becomes a halfway decent weapon. And if you add Winds of Purity and use it mostly as a defensive purpose, then it becomes actually a decent utility sort of weapon for your mission. Okay, so to test out this weapon and mod, I decided to use Banshee, and the reason I wanted to use Banshee is basically she's basically a squishy frame. She only has 15 armor, and she has a halfway decent amount of health, which is good, but I've removed redirection, so she'll only have 300 shields. So the enemy should be able to reduce her shields to 0 relatively quickly. She does have some very interesting abilities, but in this case I won't be using any of them, so all of her other mods, including Resonance, which is another augment mod, won't help her out at all. Now, in the case of the Sentinel, I'm going to remove Meta Rays so that we know that that won't be able to help restore health. And I will also remove the weapon so that the Sentinel cannot defend Banshee from any of the enemies. So she's kind of going to be in a very tough situation. Of course, the main reason I will be taking the carrier is because it can use vacuum and collect a lot of ammunition, which in this case, especially for the Furis, may be relatively important. Now, I'm going to be going to the Void and use Survival as an example. I could use anything, but I figure that this will be a good area to actually subject Banshee to some cruel testing procedures. Okay, so Banshee has arrived at the first life support, and so I'm just going to have her stand here and basically take abuse. So not only will they take her shields down to 0, but I'm going to have her take the life down to basically almost nothing and then start using the weapon. So as you can already see, she went down to 100 health and immediately went back up to 740 by killing these 2 enemies. So let's see that again. Here she's at 150, she's up to 420, 558, and while she's getting shot at, she's already up to 740. So as you can see, because the Furis shoots so many bullets at once, even if each one of the bullets doesn't damage all that much, she could actually restore her health relatively quickly in a matter of seconds, especially if she has enemies, a lot of enemies. So that is the one point, is she will need enemies to be able to restore her health because it's their damage that restores her health. Okay, so let's try that again. It is kind of painful having to subject her to this, but this will definitely show you just how well this weapon can actually work. So let's take her health down to 100 again, and there we go. She's already up to 600 with one series of shots, and with a second magazine, she's up to 740. And there you go. There's the Purity Blast effect. It's killed everybody in the area, it's restored her health, and her health is now boosted to 765 versus 740, which is what it is normally. Okay, so I think we subjected Banshee to enough abuse, so we could stop around here. You already can see how well this weapon works for restoring health. There she goes again. And the only main point is you have to watch out for your ammunition, so you shouldn't be using this as your primary weapon. It should only be as a go-to weapon for when you start losing health, but so long as you make sure that you conserve your ammo well, it actually can restore her health or your health relatively quickly. Again, she's back up to 740 again. Okay, so I think we've seen enough, so let's let Banshee go and not abuse her anymore. Okay, so in summary, there are only a finite number of ways that you could actually restore health during a mission, aside from absorbing those red globes. As you go up in mastery rank and gather more credits and platinum and open up more missions, you do get more options such as Arcane Grace, which is a very nice way of restoring health, but at the same time it's not an easy one to get a hold of. You do have Meta Ray for your Sentinel, of course Life Strike for your melee. You have health restore for certain focus capabilities, as well as certain auras that have that. But I have to admit, Winds of Purity is a very viable option for restoring health. And it is one of those that is possible to get early on in the game, basically because of the fact that the secondary weapon that it attaches to is one that you could actually get easily early on in the game. Now, as far as the 10 platinum, of course, you can't use any of the 50 platinum given to you because those can't be used for trades. But if you can somehow gather 10 platinum, then you should be able to buy this mod relatively easily in the trade channel. And so this is one option that you could actually use relatively early on in the game to as a viable health restore option, besides all those individual health restores which run out relatively quickly, or those team health restores where you have to sit there and wait for the health to actually come back in any significant manner. Okay, so if you were to list some of the pros for this mod, first of all, it's a relatively easy mod to get a hold of. It's not that expensive in the trade channel. Of course, if you wanted to go through New Loka and actually grind for it, you can actually do so as well. But comparatively speaking, as compared to some of the other capabilities for health restore, this is a relatively inexpensive one to get. The weapon that it attaches to is relatively easy to get a hold of as well, and so lower rank players can have a ability to get a really decent health restore option. The other thing is that it does restore your health very quickly, and that's because of the fact that the Furis is a rapidly firing machine gun, and so it's matter of seconds to go from relatively low health, even all the way up to about 800 health points, as you saw with Banshee. And so it's a very good weapon for when you're in a dire situation where you really need to restore your health relatively quickly. Another good point about this is that it is under your control, so you don't have to wait for any automated health restoration, such as with MediRay, where you need to get your health up right away, but you're just waiting for the probability to hit so that you could actually get the health restore capability to kick in. This one, you just pull out your secondary and you shoot some enemies, and you get your health restoration back. So it's actually a very practical way for getting your health restored. Some of its cons now. it does limit you to using the Furis as your secondary. And as nice as the Furis is, especially if you format it a few times, it's really not the best secondary by far. And so if you are a player that really enjoys to have a hard-hitting secondary, then this may not be the option for you. On the other hand, if you have a really good primary and a really good melee, then you can use your secondary as your defensive purposes. But that is up to you. Okay, so con number 2 is basically that since the Furis is a fast shooting weapon, you can eventually run out of ammo. So if you are in a situation where you're constantly requiring to restore your health, eventually you might run out of ammunition, and then you will be in a dire situation because you don't have any ammo to restore your health. Now, of course, none of the other health restore options will help out much better if you're constantly losing health all the time. But of course, this is one of the cons for the Winds of Purity, is that the Furis can run out of ammo. Okay, so the next con is that since the Winds of Purity is a life-stealing capability, then you do need enemies to be able to steal life from. So if you just happen to have no enemies to be able to shoot down, then your Furis doesn't really help you in restoring health. And at that point, of course, something like even Team Health Restore will be better to be since it doesn't require any enemies to be able to restore your health. And of course, the last con is actually a generic statement to all health restoration solutions. If you get to a point where your enemy is so powerful that they can one-shot you, then of course there's no chance for you to be able to pull out your secondary and restore your health because you're already dead at that point. But at that point anyway, you're not going to be thinking about health restoration as your option. You're going to be thinking about how to avoid getting one-shot. And so under those situations, then it may not be particularly a con in the first place. It's just not an option for you at that point. Okay, so that concludes this video. I hope you found the information quite useful. I have found that Winds of Purity was quite useful for me and still is, but especially early on in the game, it was very useful for saving me a lot of times during dire situations and missions. So I just wanted to introduce this mod for anybody who may not be familiar with it. As always, thank you very much for watching this video. If you have any comments, as always, please post them in the section below. It's always a pleasure to make these videos for you, and I hope you come back again. And as always, Jaya, nice day, everyone.